Hey class, Prof JC here. I hope that you had a great spring break a couple weeks ago and that you were able to spend some time just relaxing. If you're anything like me, you probably just spent that time kind of getting caught up on things you needed to get caught up with, but that feels good as well. And I hope you enjoyed kind of the breakaway from a podcast for the week. But we're going to dive in now, and I'm very excited because as we wrap up the rest of our class here, as we move towards really defining what our principles and values are, I think that this is going to be good for you. It's always as I walk through this class and get to kind of teach through this class, it's a great reminder for me. I also want to say this, that I'm very excited. We've already got some people who are going to join me on the podcast here from class in the next couple of weeks. As a matter of fact, today I switched around what we were going to talk about because next week there's something that we need to talk through that we were actually going to talk through this week, but I have someone from class who's actually going to join, so I'm very excited about that, and they're very excited about being able to hear from you. And again, one thing I love about teaching, I don't teach any of the undergraduate students here, and just between you and me, I'm grateful for that. I don't understand them too much. I didn't have kind of the regular undergraduate experience at a school like Point Loma. I was commuting back and forth from San Diego up to UCLA for about 3 years, and then I went to community college before that. So I've always been in kind of a grown-up season when I've been doing school. So the thing I love about our grad students is that you've got experience in the marketplace. And so when we have these talks, I get to hear from you and from your life experience, from your leadership experience. We're all going to learn together. And so that's one thing that I really appreciate. Hey, so here's what I want to do today. Today, I want to share a little bit from this book here, and we might jump all over the place, but there's a point that I want to make that I think is important. Make sure I've already lost my place. Okay, so here we are. And I'm actually going to share transparently from a recent experience that I had on this journey of continuous improvement in my own life. And there was a situation that happened in my own life, nothing serious, but there was a situation where I'm in the marketplace doing training, doing work, and I'm finding myself not at the level where I should be. And so I had to go back, and I had to rethink some things, and I had to do some journaling. I had to do some self-reflection as to why did I not show up my very best in that situation. And so everything we're talking about here, I know that these 1-unit classes sometimes can be like a stick in the eye. Like, man, I've already got to take this 3-unit class and this other 3, and now I'm taking this 1-unit class. But I think I'm a little bit biased here, but I think that what we're talking about in these 3-unit classes are so important because they help us in how we show up to the marketplace. It's one thing to show up to the marketplace, but it really is important how we show up to the marketplace. And if we're going to consistently be on our game and be the kind of business people, be the kind of leaders that show up and lead other people well, that build great organizations, that give back to society, that serve the marketplace, that serve people, that add value, that means we've got to be number one in our game as much as possible. Okay, so here's what I want to read through here real quick. In this book, I'm in the book Road to Character by David Brooks. Again, I hope you got the book, and I hope you keep it in your arsenal because it really is a great book. In chapter 8 is where I'm at right now, but if you go all the way back to chapter 7, there's all kinds of things he talks about. At one point, he talks about neediness, and I think it's in chapter 7 here. I'm trying to find it. He talks about love, agency, yes. So back here in chapter 7, he talks about this idea of being needy, okay? And I'm trying to see, he summed it up somehow, but then he goes in, he talks about neediness and how if we're not careful, that is a thing that we wrestle with in life, which then led to this idea of agency, okay? And he says this on page 164, this agency moment. So agency, when he talks about agency, it's that moment when you realize and I realize that everything we do is because we have the power to do it. I know it sounds cheesy, but that's the truth. Too many people, and again, we're in a faith-based university here, so I know some of you may disagree with me on this, I'm a faith-based person, but I'm not a person who believes that every time I need to do something, I have to go ask God, my higher power, to give me power to do that thing. I think that there's often times where people don't do certain things because they're waiting on some kind of a secret power when really it's within us. Like I think of small things like going to the gym. And those of you who work out, you go to the gym, you understand this. It's rare that you have a day where you wake up and you say, I can't wait to get to the gym. Okay. Maybe you're different from me. I know there are actually people who actually do that. They can't wait. They look forward to it. They're kind of like gym rats. They live in the gym. They love it. Okay. And I see it. I work out at the LA Fitness here and I see it. There's a lot of people there, a lot of men and women there who probably that's the highlight of their day. But for most average people, it's not the highlight of their day. It's something they have to do. It's something they have to discipline themselves to do. And so if you're a person who says, well, I want to get fit and I want to work out and I want to go to the gym 3 or 4 days a week, and then every time you have to go, you have to sit down and pray that God will give you the power to go to the gym, you're probably not going to ever go to the gym because at some point there's just this inner self-discipline that we have to go do that. Another area for me is food. I love carbs. I love sugar. Even to this day, it's still something I wrestle with. If I just sit and pray about it all day and say, give me power, um, as opposed to saying no, I can just say no to that Oreo right there. I can just say no to that thing that I don't need to be eating, all that pasta, spaghetti, pizza, whatever it is, right? I can say no. I've got that agency. Okay, so that's what agency is. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with relying on a high power. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a relationship with God and relying on God and having prayers. And the prayers might go like, for me, they would go something like, beginning of the week, hey, I've got these goals set out. I've got this, I'm trying to teach well at Point Loma. I've got these podcasts I need to get out. I need to grade well. I need to show up to class well, my in-person, classes well. I need to show up to my meetings and lead well, lead our graduate programs well. I also have kind of a business I've got going on the side here of consulting and training. I need to do that well. So God, please give me the strength. Okay. But here's what I know. At some point during the week, I don't want to send the emails. I don't want to show up to class well. I'm tired, whatever. I don't want to do the podcast. So that's where that inner strength, that's the agency that he talks about. And it's really important that we understand that. Okay. That especially for faith-based people, we can get too caught up sometimes in, I need some higher power to do this thing for me. And really it's that agency. Okay. I've spent a little too much time on that, but having grown up in deeply religious home and have been around deeply religious people most of my life, this is one thing that annoys me the most about a lot of people who are deeply religious is that there's, well, I'm just going to sit around and pray. I remember an atheist told me this one time. I had some big goals and I was like, I just gotten out of the army. I was like 22, 23. And we're standing outside of the place we worked. He's on a smoke break and I didn't smoke at the time, but I just wanted to stand out there. This is actually a really cool guy. And so he's asking me about my dreams and goals. And I said, well, here's what I'm going to do and blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, that's cool. He said, so what are you doing to make that happen? I said, oh, nothing. I'm just kind of praying about it. And I think God's going to open up the doors. He said, well, didn't God give you 2 arms and 2 legs? Oh man, I'll never forget that as long as I live. An atheist. And I remember it just stunned me. I'd never heard that before. Like, wait, what? you know, and that's always stuck with me that I don't have to pray about everything because God already gave me 2 arms, 2 legs. He gave me a voice and eyes. Now I know not everybody has all that, so I want to be careful to say that, but I know for me, that's what he's given to me. Right. And so anyway, that agency is the moment you realize you can make something happen. You don't have to depend on mom and dad, some higher power, whatever. You make it happen. And here's what he says. This agency moment can happen for many people surprisingly late in life, and that's very true. Sometimes you see lack of agency among the disadvantaged, okay? And that's what we just talked about. Some people don't have agency because they're not given everything that you've been given. And that's why I think for those of you who've been given agency, you've been given 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyeballs, the ability to speak, the ability to write, the ability to learn, read. You've got to take advantage of that. You've got to continue. And even after this graduate program is over, don't ever stop reading. Don't ever stop growing in your intellect, right? All of that stuff is incredibly important, okay? Their lives can be so blown about by economic disruption arbitrary bosses, and general disruption that they lose faith in the idea that input leads to predictable output. You can offer programs to improve their lives, but they may not take full advantage of them because they just don't have confidence that they can control their own destinies. That's the agency I'm talking about, is when you understand that you have the power, if I can use that, you have the agency where you can control your own destiny. So he talks about that. He talks about neediness. He talks about intellectual love. But then we get over here to chapter 8, and he says this. Okay, he talks about this idea of ambition, and he says these words right here. He says, at 17, so I'm just going to read this through you. At 17, Augustine went to Carthage to continue his studies. In his spiritual memoir, The Confessions, he makes it sound as if he was consumed by lust. I came to Carthage, he says, of his student days, where the cauldron of illicit loves leaped and boiled about me. Okay, he was a normal person growing up with normal emotions, normal feelings. That's basically what it was. Augustine's presence didn't exactly calm things down. He describes himself as a tumultuous young man, his blood boiling with passions, lusts, jealousies, desires. Again, all those things that we happen, any of us, we've been through that in life. That's just a normal, natural progression of life. And then it goes on. Here are the words of Augustine. He says, I was not yet in love, but I was in love with love. And from the depths of my need, I hated myself. What I needed most was to love and to be loved. And most of all, when I obtained the enjoyment of the body of the person who loved me, I rushed headlong into love, eager to be caught. There's a lot of loves happening here. Happily, I wrapped those painful bonds around me, and sure enough, I would be lashed with red-hot iron rods of jealousy by suspicion and fear, by bursts of anger and quarrels. And then the author of this book goes on to say this. Augustine was apparently history's most high-maintenance boyfriend. His language is precise. He was not in love with another human being. He was in love with the prospect of being loved. It was all about him, and that's the key of that I want us to take here, okay? It was all about him. And in his memoir, he describes how his disordered lust fed on themselves. In Book 8 of Confessions, Augustine includes an almost clinical description of how his emotional neediness was an addiction. Now, I'm not going to read through that. You can find that on page 190. But then it goes on to say, Augustine was forced to confront in a very direct way the fact that he was divided against himself. Part of him sought the shallow pleasures of the world. Part of him disapproved of these desires. His desires were out of harmony with his other faculties. He can imagine a pure way of living, but he can't get there. He was restless, unaligned. Now, I bring all that up to say this. It was all about him. He was restless. He was unaligned. He was a young man, okay? So we tend to think, well, this kind of thing happens when you're younger. It doesn't happen when you're older, right? And there's some truth to that. As we get older, the things we feel and our emotions, what we're passionate about are different things. I was telling someone the other day that when I first began journaling, which was years ago, I mean, this would have been 15, 16 years ago. I would have been in my early 30s, I guess, late 20s, early 30s when I first discovered this. And I don't have too many copies. I didn't save them like I do now. I'm very particular about saving them now, but I saved them on drives or hard drive or on those little things that you get, those little discs or whatever, and now those discs are corrupted, so I can't go back and read them. But if I were, here's what I know I'd find. It's a much different JC at age 29 than it is at 45, right? It's much more selfish, and my journals were all about me. Now when I get in my journal, I'm writing about business, and I'm writing about classes and ideas and how do you change the world, and this is kind of what happens over time. So there is a maturation that happens over time, but here's what I'm going to tell you, okay? So 2 weekends ago, I was in Kansas City, Missouri. Now, be careful. If you ever go to Kansas City, you know what I'm talking about. Don't call it Kansas City, Kansas if you're on the Missouri side. They don't like it. I made that mistake, okay? So we went out there and we did some training for a group of foremen. They were iron workers, and they were foremen. On Friday when we flew in, I actually flew in Thursday, and because I had some things here that I had to take care of here for Point Loma, so I couldn't get on a plane till 4 o'clock. I didn't actually touch down in Kansas City till about 12 midnight, and then get to my room till 2 o'clock. We had to get up the next morning. We had to be downstairs in the hotel lobby at 5 a.m. because we went over to the job site. 7 a.m. we went over to the job site to see this $4 billion construction site for Panasonic, actually, and they're building batteries. And part of this warehouse or part of this battery manufacturing plant is going to be used to build batteries for Tesla. So it was very cool to be a part of that. We were called in, the guy that I worked for, consulting, we were called in because the foreman on the job, uh, and they're all men on this one. So I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to be divisive here, but they were just all men. But they were struggling with some leadership things. And because of that, because of the struggle of leadership, this group that called us in was, they were in danger of losing the contract with this $4 billion job. Okay. So we were called in to kind of help. So we got to take a walk, and then we went in to do the training. Now, I don't know what it was, okay? But I had some things going on inside of me that I didn't have time to handle, didn't have time to get to the gym. You know, for me, if I journal and I go to the gym or go for a walk, whatever, those things are important. But I had to fly in. I remember Thursday, I had a whole bunch of stuff, couldn't get to the gym, couldn't journal or anything. And I got on the plane and I had to get work done. I flew in, had to, get 2 hours of sleep and wake up the next day. Then all that day we're out at the plant. And then by that afternoon, I'm exhausted. So I take a nap. I've got to show up downstairs that evening, that Friday evening, so we can kind of go over the plan for the next day, go back upstairs and go to bed, exhausted, wake up the next morning. Again, we got to be over at the place to start this training by 7 a.m. on a Saturday for these foremen. So these foremen aren't going to be very happy. They're all getting paid to be there, but they're not going to be happy. So all this happens, and I'm given a part of this training, a pretty significant part of this training to do. And so I get up and do the training. I have no problem with that, no issue with that. But the major part that I was given was where we talk about generations and how there are five different generations in the workplace, and how do we lead the younger generations. Now, anytime I do this training for a group of blue collar workers, it hardly ever goes well, right? And it's not, I've tried to make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do and bring to the table. But that group, and again, I grew up in Indiana. I grew up in a very blue collar city. I understand where they're coming from. Their perspective is, well, life wasn't easy for me, so I'm not going to make it any easier for the people coming behind me. And that's all that that's all they want to say. So I do this, this generation training. It's going well, getting feedback. People are engaging. All of a sudden, someone shouts out, "This generation stuff is bullshit." That's what they shout out. Now, typically what I do, that's actually a fun time for me because I love pushback, okay? And so typically what I would have done is stop the room, and I would have said, "Okay, all right. So, say that one more time again." And they would have said it again. And I said, "Okay, well, let's talk about that." And then we would have just dove into that. Why do we think that is? And then come to some kind of a solution so we can keep moving, forward. Well, this training, I didn't do that. And I kind of let that guy kind of steamroll over me. Now, again, this is a strong group of people. Okay, these iron workers, they are salt of the earth, blue collar, they, good people. Okay, but they are not to be intimidated. And we're coming in brand new. We don't have the trust of these men at all. And for some reason, there were a couple things that were happening in the room that kind of set me off my game a little bit. But I'm pretty good at doing this, but I didn't show up in that situation the way I should. As a matter of fact, what I did, if I'm being transparent with you, is I did what you should never do when you're facilitating. When something like that happens, you slow down the room, right? And you kind of stop the room, you slow down, and you hone in on that thing, whatever it is. Because everybody sees it, and everyone sees you just got challenged. Instead, for some reason, I sped up. And so I just tried to get done with the training as quick as I could, my part of the training, and then step to the side. And so afterwards, and the training went great. The rest of it was great. And, most people wouldn't have realized that, but I knew that I'd messed up. I knew that I had not brought my full self. So after dinner, or at dinner, we went to like one of those Brazilian steakhouses. Great place. Sat down, we're eating, and we're kind of doing our after action review about what could we've done better, and I just called it out myself. I said, "Hey, here's what happened." So we dove into that, okay? And here's the reason why I'm bringing this up with this right here. We drew a thread from that, okay? And the guy I'm working with, who's brilliant, he's kind of a coach himself. We were able to draw a thread, and it came back to some personal things that I need to deal with in my own life. And again, don't get concerned. These aren't major things or anything like that, but they're little cracks. And here's what I know, and here's what I'm learning, especially with the work I do in the marketplace. When you show up at these major gigs where people are paying thousands of dollars, not necessarily for me, but they're on that day, they paid 70 men to be there. outside of the workplace, they're paying them all overtime, time and a half pay to be sitting. So thousands of dollars went into this training. We've done massive meetings up to this, and we've got different contractors and companies and CEOs and project managers and all that. I'm learning so much about the construction, industry. It's fascinating. Thousands of dollars went into that 8 hours, right? I have to show up at peak performance. Okay. So there were some things I had to look at and say, well, I didn't get very good sleep. That was probably part of it. Didn't get to the gym, didn't journal, some of these inner things. But then I realized that there were a couple things that were really irking me in the back of my mind, things that were really kind of on my nerves and things I hadn't really thought about. All of that stuff. This is the point I'm trying to make. In that moment where I should have been there for that person, and when he yelled out, "Generations training is bullshit." Okay, that's an opinion. That's an okay opinion for him to have. I've done this training many times, and half the people I do it for have the same opinion. But where I needed to stop and turn it and make it about them, and what I did was somehow I took that personal, made it about me, and I sped up and I just tried to get off that, get off that training as quick as possible. And so what I'm saying is that night at dinner, I realized I've got some personal things on the inside that I need to get fixed so that I can show up to the marketplace well. So we talk about this idea of integrity, and I've told you before what I think integrity is. It's not a good or bad thing. It just is. Integrity is you show up who you are. Okay. That's what integrity is. So in that moment, I was showing up with integrity, but I didn't like the results that I saw. Okay. Now, again, it didn't impact the whole thing. We're heading back out there here in just a couple more weeks to do our second training with them, and everything's going to go great, right? It's going to be great. But I learned in that moment, it was about me, and it shouldn't have been, at that moment, it shouldn't have been about me. For whatever reason, I let that gentleman kind of take over, and instead of making it about the room, it became more about somehow I clammed up instead of diving into it further. And so when I go back again, I got to make sure that I come back with a clear head, that I'm able to live with integrity. So for me, it's make sure so I'm flying in the next time I got my plane ticket, flying in at 1 p.m. the day before, make sure I get good rest, make sure I'm able to go to the gym probably that day. And then the next day, get up early. So I get to bed early, all that stuff, journal, do whatever I need to do so that when I show up with integrity, that integrity, it's not about me. It's all about them. The other class I'm teaching is the other 1 unit class I'm teaching is a class on service. And one of the most important things that we talk about in that class is we have to be able to show up from a mindset that is giving to our clients, giving to the marketplace, adding value to the marketplace versus taking from the marketplace. So I just wanted to share that with you because that's a real thing that happened, and it helped me get on the plane the next day and say, I can't ever let that happen again. And it probably will at some point. I'll have to go back. But that's why these inner things that we talk about are so important. You wonder why you have a micromanaged boss. Maybe you're a micromanaging boss. You wonder why? Because it's the inner stuff. You wonder why you led a piss poor meeting XYZ day, it didn't go well. It has to do with you. It comes back to you. You want to know why your presentations aren't going well at work and you're not getting the points across you want to get made. There's something within you that has to be worked out on that. Okay. And so that was a huge learning lesson for me. It can't ever be about us. Okay. It can't ever be about us. We must always be aligned in the direction we're going. And so for myself, it's making sure I'm aligned with those men, those 4 men, making sure I'm aligned with our training, our content. I'll make sure I'm aligned with myself. All that comes together, then you're able to approach, and someone calls out something in the middle of training that can set the whole room ablaze. I don't have to move away from it. I can move into it. And I could have helped better. I could have helped add value to him, add value to the people in the room. So here's what I'm going to say. Life of integrity, you're going to show out. That's just how it's going to be. Question for you. Is there something in your life right now that you would look at and you would say, the reason why I'm not leading the best I could in my business, in my leadership, whatever it is, the reason why I'm not leading the way that I should is because I've got XYZ going on. And you don't have to tell me what XYZ is, okay? That's between you and you. You can share it if you want. I'm the only one who reads these, but you don't have to. But here's what I'm going to ask. What are you doing to overcome XYZ? Okay, whatever that thing is, if you're not leading it the way you want, if you don't have the results in life that you want right now, if your business isn't where it is, I heard somebody say something else on YouTube the other day. It was I needed to hear it. Because again, I teach and this is my full-time thing. And well, but I also work for this consulting company. And then I'm also trying to build my own uh, uh, as well. And the thing the person said is that your business, success is a direct reflection of your own life right now. And so when I looked at my own business and I'm trying to grow and things maybe I'm running behind on and whatever, I thought, man, that is that is deep and it's what I needed to hear at that time. So again, it always comes back to us. So are there things that are holding you back right now? You can mention those. You don't have to. But what I want to know is, the reflection you have. What are the things that you're doing to make sure that you can show up to the marketplace well, that you can show up with solid integrity and integrity that leads to positive results, and that you've done the best you can. If not, what are the things that you're doing to help you overcome that? Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you in the next podcast. Again, I'm looking forward to others of you joining me on the podcast and having some good conversations in weeks to come. Have a great week. Reach out if you need me. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.